When you get a raise, do you make a small decision to put away X% of that raise, just so you know you're making that small choice towards saving? If you actually sit down and start adding things up, you know how it can compound to actually real impact on your financial situation in a positive way. And it's the same thing whether you're training for a marathon or you just want to be healthy and fit for life. Can you wake up and eat a slightly healthier breakfast? Can you turn off Netflix and get to bed 45 minutes earlier so you can wake up and maybe go for a fast walk or get to a class? Once you start making these small decisions, they have a ripple effect across the rest of your life.
Hey everyone, I'm Jean Chatzky. Thanks so much for joining me today on HerMoney, where we talk about how personal finance and money touches everything in our lives. Here's a question for all of you. When was the last time you learned something new? I don't mean picking up the newspaper and learning something interesting. I mean learning a new skill, a new hobby, whether it's a new instrument or trying bar or Pilates for the first time, or really digging into those art classes. When was the last time you picked up something brand new that stimulates your brain or stimulates your hands? You might feel like you can't learn things as fast as maybe you could when you were younger, or that if you did try to pick up a new sport, you might get injured. But my guest today says it is time to ignore that nagging voice at the back of your head that says that you can't do it or that you will look silly in front of the younger people in your class, and just give it a try, especially if you're in your 50s or older. I think you're going to thank her down the road. According to research from Scientific American, learning new skills is one of the best ways to keep you sharp, to keep your brain sharp, not to mention your body as you age. Their research found that learning new skills in older adulthood, it leads to cognitive development, similar cognitive development to learning new skills when we're kids. But how much does it improve our brains, and how long does it take to actually happen, to experience a change? Just a month and a half. A month and a half after learning a new skill, the cognitive abilities of folks who did this increased to levels similar to those of their peers who were 30 years younger. My guest today, Gwendolyn Bounds, found this out firsthand when she took up Spartan Racing. Yes, Spartan Racing at age 47. If you have never heard of Spartan races, and we're going to break them down, let me just say they are not easy. They involve running up hills that many of us couldn't even walk up, crawling under barbed wire, climbing a 7-foot rope, and traversing monkey bars over a dizzying height. And I see a lot of parallels in the way that striving for financial goals and taking on new financial challenges is similar to the stamina that it takes to dig into these physical and mental challenges in middle or even later ages. Gwendolyn Bounds, Wendy Bounds, is an award-winning journalist. She's an author whose work has appeared in the Wall Street Journal, ABC News, CNBC, to name just a few, and her new book is called Not Too Late: The Power of Pushing Limits at Any Age. Wendy, welcome. So nice to have you here.
Jean, it's great to be here, and I'm so excited to hear you make this connection between the physical and the financial, right? Leave it to you to be able to do this, but as a former Wall Street Journal reporter, I'm super excited about the conversation we're going to have.
Yeah, I am as well. Tell us about Spartan Racing, and I understand it was a fateful Google search that made you take the leap to just dig in.
I will give you the origin story, but as you said, let's set the stage for folks about what a Spartan race is. It's a type of obstacle course racing. Obstacle course racing is a sport. A version of it will actually be included in the Olympics in 2028 in Los Angeles as part of the modern pentathlon. But a Spartan race really combines endurance cross-country running, you alluded to this, running through farmland or up and down ski slopes and mountains through rocky terrain, as well as hunter-gatherer or military-style obstacles, scaling a 17-foot rope, carrying heavy sandbags, 40, 60 pounds of up and down the mountains, slithering, as you said, under barbed wire, even throwing a spear. It's a sport that requires you to be quite disciplined on a lot of fronts, whether it's your respiratory fitness or your strength or even your general mobility. I like to think it makes you fit for life and some of the tasks at hand that we have to deal with at any age, but particularly as we grow older. Do you have mobility? If your dog's ball rolls under the bed, can you get down and get it? Do you have the strength to put your suitcase in the overhead bin? These are the types of things that I think obstacle course racing prepares you for. So that's the sport. And very quickly, you alluded to how I came upon this. I was a scrawny, gangly kid growing up. I was not an athlete, and I kind of morphed into an adult who did a lot of sitting in front of my screens as a journalist, as you said, and I exercised just enough maybe to justify my gym membership, but it certainly wasn't part of the A plot of who I was. But I was at a dinner party right before my 45th birthday, and I overheard this older man. He was well into his gen at that point, and he asked this young girl, he said to her, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Very normal question you ask little girls. And she just started going on and listing all these things. I could be a computer coder, or I could be an artist, I could be a veterinarian, and I could see his eyes glazed over. But it really hit me hard, Jean. Like, in middle age, nobody asks you that anymore. And more importantly, we stop asking ourselves. And that was the catalyst that set me off the next morning. I woke up quite groggy, grabbed a cup of coffee, and I still don't know why I typed this into Google, but I typed, "What are the hardest things you can do?" And the algorithm spit back, "What are the hardest physical things you can do?" And Spartan Racing was among them. I had no idea what it was. I clicked, and the journey began.
You said you were not an athletic kid, an overly athletic person. I mean, just the thought, and I think I said at the top of the show it was a 7-foot rope. I mean, a 17-foot rope. I have flashbacks to, the ropes that you had to climb in gym class and how awful that was. Awful. What made you think, oh, of all the hard things, that's the thing?
It's a great question. And I think, my mother and father and my friends and family are still asking themselves that. But I think I was born 1 year before Title IX was passed, which gave women equal footing in sports. And the girls that I grew up with who were strong and athletic, they were revered for it, right? They were some of the most popular girls. They had a sense of self and a sense of confidence about them that I think I envied, right? And I always wanted to be a part of it. It just didn't come naturally to me, right? Words came naturally to me. People praised me for stringing words together. So like most people, I followed the praise and into a career in journalism. But nobody was praising me for how I dribbled a basketball or, ran down the soccer field. And so I joined teams, but I spent a lot of time sitting on the bench, passing out the water and watching. So I think somewhere inside me, I always craved something, a sense of leadership, a sense of self, a sense of discipline that I thought sports, competitive sports, organized sports could bring me. And I once heard it said, Jean, that if you can find the thing you were made fun of as a kid and you can get good at it, it can become your superpower. And that's a very interesting thing to think about. And so I think later in life, in midlife, trying to become good at this thing where I was not praised, and to some degree I was made fun of for being a scrawny kid at this age, and turning that story around has been very empowering for me in midlife. It's right. Middle age is a time when sometimes we start to think about we're turning the corner toward endings. And this has all been about new beginnings. And I think for anyone listening, thinking about what it is in their life that they could start that could point them towards some of these new beginnings, whether it's on the financial front, the physical front, the mental front, it can be quite, I don't want to overstate it, but I think it can be quite life-changing.
Yeah, I mean, it has been for me. I relate to a lot in your story. I was also not an athletic kid. I did go out for the cross-country team in high school because we had moved to a new place. I needed to make some new friends, and seemed like something I might be able to do. And I came in last in every race, like every race. And I have I have a letter, a varsity letter that I got for showing up, and I hold on to that. But as I, and my audience knows, as I am training for the marathon and as I get my time under a 10-minute mile, which for me is a big deal, I feel like more of an athlete than I've ever felt in my life. And that's something that means something to me.
I love that you kept your varsity letter, right? I mean, that's indicative of something that was a profound memory that resonated, had emotional, cognitive resonance with you that stuck with you, right? And has stayed with you. And I think probably somewhere, even if you can't reach it, like it is driving you now to the degree of your training. And you cannot train for a marathon with the goal that you have of running under 10-minute miles without having intrinsic motivation, right? It's very different than extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation is something external, right? You cross, you're going to get that medal. Somebody might pay you to do something. It might be a prize money. It might be a promotion, but it's something that's like fleeting and that you get in the moment. Intrinsic motivation is something deep rooted inside of you, i.e., for you, the memory maybe of finishing last in cross country, right? That is something that drives you. For me, the memory of being that kind of scrawny kid sitting on the bench. I have intrinsic motivation to get up and to train and to be disciplined and committed to it and to finish when things are really hard and painful in a way that you will not feel motivated by that if the chips are really down, right? If you're in the middle of your marathon, Jean, and everything's going wrong and you're cramping and you've got a pain in your calf and you feel dehydrated, just thinking about getting that finisher medal, that's not going to be enough. But if it's something that's driving you deep inside of you, you're probably going to keep going a lot longer and be more successful than if you were just motivated by a prize or a few $100s of something. So that's the difference.
We're a money show. People tune in to learn about how to be more successful with their finances. And a lot of the things that we talk about on this show are goals, retirement, college, emergency funds, right, paying down debt, just saving for that next vacation. How is this similar?
There's so many similarities to me, and I actually think about them quite a bit, and maybe it's by virtue of having been a Wall Street Journal reporter for so long. But let's start with saving, right? I think in some ways, exercise is like money. You want to start saving as early as you can, but however old you are, it's not too late to start. And that's the same thing with exercise, right? We used to think, and the scientific research used to suggest that you needed to start early to bear any fruits of your effort. That is not the case. And so, as you know, and you talk with your audience about regularly, saving whatever you can when you can, like, sure, you want to get started as early as possible. I'm not saying you should wait, but you can actually reap real benefits no matter what point you start at. Your strategy will need to be different to some degree, right? Of how you invest. Your strategy will need to be different if you start exercising in middle age versus if you started when you were in your 20s. But I think there are a lot of similarities in knowing just fundamentally that it's not too late and throwing up your hands and giving up. So that's one thing. You talked about, I think you said about saving for vacations and things of that nature. You know, I spoke with one of the country's leading authorities on aging, a man named Stephen Ostad, and he told me how hospitals now are putting people on prehabilitation programs to exercise and start a new exercise routine before they go into surgery, right? So if you have a big surgery coming up, they're actually having people start these routines before they go in. I think of that a lot about, like, if you're saving to go on a vacation, you have this goal, right? And you need to save up for it and you need to be disciplined for that. So there's another similarity there, right? And just in having a goal and having the discipline and the grit and making the small daily choices that you have to reach that goal. There's a couple of other correlations I can think about, but I want to pause and get your reflections on those to start.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about definitely the goal, but those small daily actions that enable you to make progress, I think, are even more important often than the goal themselves. I did a study years ago on money and happiness. And one of the findings was that the achievement of the benchmarks, the process of working your way toward the goal actually made people happier than reaching the goal itself. And when people reached the goal, sometimes they felt a little bit of a letdown and they had to set that next goal in order to keep their happiness up. It's sort of the doing of it that we tend to feel, I think, a little more satisfied about. The fact that, yeah, I can do this every day or whatever your schedule happens to be.
That is a very good point, and I think there's a crossover between fitness and just health and well-being overall. I talk a lot about the small decisions, right? You're alluding to this, the small choices that we make that add up to the big impact, and that the satisfaction truly does come in the process, right? The daily happiness comes in the process, because once you reach the goal, it's over. There's a philosopher at MIT named Kiran Setia who talks about this, and he uses these two words. He uses the word atelic and telic activities. So telic activities are one that are finite. They have an ending. So what you're saying, you save, you hit that goal, you go on that vacation, but then it's over. You eat a good meal. It's great at the time, but then it's over. Atelic activities are never ending. They're about the process, the little choices we make day in, day out that give us footing and make us grounded and make us feel like we have control over our days. So in some ways, if you think about it on the financial front, when you get a raise, each time you get a raise, do you make a small decision to put away whatever X percent of that raise is, right? Just so you know you're making that small choice towards saving. Or even to be more granular daily about it, are you choosing to make a cup of coffee at home where it costs you a fraction of the price of buying a cup of coffee out? I'm sure you've used that analogy many times. But if you actually sit down and start adding things up, you know how it can compound to actually have real impact on your financial situation in a positive way. And it's the same thing, as you know, whether you're training for a marathon or an obstacle course race, or you just want to be healthy and fit for life, as we were talking about before. Can you wake up and eat a slightly healthier breakfast? Can you make a decision to not have that extra snack in the middle of the day? Can you turn off Netflix and get to bed 45 minutes earlier so you can wake up and maybe go for a fast walk or a run or get to a class or maybe go play tennis with someone? Once you start making these small decisions, they have a ripple effect across the rest of your life. And I think they compound, right? That's a term you probably use a lot on your show,
Yep,
but they compound over time. So I couldn't agree with you more. And I think it's really healthy to focus on the small decisions, particularly when you're starting out, whether it is starting out to really grab hold of and take control of your financial situation, or to improve your health with a new, say, fitness routine, or just making small decisions overall, for your well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got in the book, you have seven key guideposts on your path to mastery. And I think they work for money, just like I think that they work for fitness. We're going to dig into them, but first we're going to take a quick break. We are back with Wendy Bounds, author of Not Too Late. So I know 7 is a lot, but can we briefly just explore what these are, especially as it relates to learning to live with the fear of the unknown and unlearning the bad habits that hold us back? Because I think, boy, that ties into our relationships with money backwards and forwards. So the first one on the list, I'll start off and then I'll let you pick it up, is the realization and true belief that there could be something inside you untapped in middle age.
There's a point we reach, I think, where we fall into what I've come to think of as this cycle of sameness, right? The same routines every day. You wake up, eat the same thing, you have the same conversations, go to the same job, take the same route, same restaurant, right? And these are all things you've more or less chosen, right? Maybe some more than others, but it begins to feel like inertia has kicked in, right? And to my mind, breaking that cycle of sameness is critical to your well-being and mental age on a couple of fronts, because we know from the research that chronic boredom actually has real health risks, right? It can lead to anxiety and depression and even the risk of making mistakes. And I think that when you believe there is something untapped in you and that you can find and make the time to embrace that, then that is a very powerful lever that changes and breaks that cycle. So that's what I'm talking about when I am talking about believing there's something untapped, Jean.
The figuring out how to manage your time is the second one on the list. And look, you talked about the coffee example, and I have used it so many times in life that I try actively not to use it. But we make coffee in my house here. We make it in the morning, we set it up at night, we flip a switch in the morning. It doesn't take a ton of time because we've figured out how to manage the process. And for a lot of people who spend an exorbitant amount of money on takeout and other conveniences, it's a time problem as much as it is a money problem, just as figuring out where to fit exercise in your day is.
You've alluded to something that I refer to in the book Not Too Late as a time suck slice. These little tiny 5-10 minute sucks of time that during the day that don't seem like a big deal at the time, but if you add them up, you come up with a real great chunk of time that you could have spent doing something and investing in something more meaningful. You use the coffee example. An example that I'll give that's very in the weeds, but I'm sure some people out there will probably identify with this. And if they don't identify with this one, they'll have their own example. But every morning I would be racing to work and I would be trying to put my earrings in. And I would be trying to screw in my earring backing. And because I was in a rush, my earring backing would fall on the wood floor, bounce somewhere, and I'd have to spend 5 minutes looking for it. I mean, this happened a couple of times a week. Until finally one day, I just happened to be leaning over my bed and the earring backing fell on my bed and didn't bounce because it was on the bed. I was like, oh, I'm just going to lean over the bed every time I put my earring in, right? People are like, but I'm telling you, when I added it up, I was like, oh, I just got back X hundred minutes of my life from this one thing. And I think I'm being very granular for a reason, because I think if someone put a camera on us and filmed us over the day and we saw how much of these time suck slices, like we were spending doing this or checking our Instagram or running over here, or, oh, I got something on Amazon or this, I think I would have been horrified, I think. And there's some days I probably would still be horrified at myself, but I've tried really hard to think about where I can reduce those little moments. And that's how I was able to get enough time back to begin to train for obstacle course racing. And I think some of that same discipline and rigor, as you have said, really can apply to your finances as well.
Number 3 is fascinating because it's the thing that prevents women from investing, and that is fear. We are just afraid. We're afraid we don't know enough. We're afraid we might lose money. We're afraid of participating in something where the outcome is uncertain. And you do this with Spartan Racing every day.
There are a lot of metaphors in obstacle course racing that I think apply to life overall, and you just alluded to one of them, which is how to overcome fear. I mean, there's certain obstacles where I still feel fear in my belly sometimes when I approach them. For instance, you go under a dunk wall and you submerge yourself fully clothed and then come out into these muddy pits and climb through them, and then you have to run up what they call a steep slip wall and grab for a rope to pull yourself up. It's a very counterintuitive thing to do, to be wet and slimy with mud and then to run up something that's slippery and then lean back to trust yourself to walk up. I mean, the first couple of times I did this, I had to want what was on the other side of that slip wall more than I feared the act of doing that myself, right? So I think there's a lot to think about there for all of us, as you said, women in particular, but thinking about what's on the other side of what we're scared of. And so if we want what's on the other side, that can be the thing that can help us get through that level of fear. And so for me, I wanted to keep racing. Like if I wanted to go on in the race and I wanted to do well and I didn't want to have to do a penalty, I was going to do my best and overcome my fear with that. And I think with women, when it comes to Are you going to speak up when you think you didn't get the raise that you deserved? I've been in this place many times and have learned, I learned very early on from one of my female mentors at the Wall Street Journal, who was an editor, who taught me immediately a very hard lesson about negotiation and about speaking up for what I thought I deserved in the workplace, for knowing what my counterparts, particularly my male counterparts, made, for doing my research and learning and having the numbers at my fingertips. And being, doesn't mean you have to be demanding, but you can be very firm. And more times than I can count, Jean, it has yielded me positive results to have these conversations if I felt that I had been unfairly compensated for something. And I think for women to learn to overcome that sense of, well, we should just be grateful for what we have, or I don't want to rock the boat. And I think some men can feel this too, but that is a lesson in overcoming fear of a different sort.
Do you find that fear diminishes? That as you practice these behaviors of things that scare you, they become less scary? I mean, I have told the story, I think, on this show about how I got physically ill for the first 2 years of doing the Today Show. Like, I would just get to the studio and head for the restroom. And over time, that went away, right? That part of the fear. I was always nervous, always a little like, let's make sure you know your stuff. But the level of the fear died down.
There's a difference. And I really like your analogy about the Today Show, because I think anytime you're starting something new that has big potential ramifications, at least for you as a person and your career and your life, and you feel that the stakes are highish, you're going to have, I think you are going to have a belly full of fear. And that's very natural. I absolutely believe without a doubt that it dissipates and gets better over time the more you do it. And it certainly has for me. The fear that I had in obstacle course racing, not only has that dialed down substantially, but it has carried over into other parts of my life. I sit with more confidence. I speak with more confidence in meetings. If somebody's trying to interrupt me, I don't let that happen anymore, right? And some of it's just ingrained because I have a sense of self-confidence that, I mean, I can climb a 17-foot rope. I can go through a half marathon world championship race and complete it. And that just gives you a baseline of confidence. But I also think I want to tap on something you said, which I do think is important, because people, your fear may never go away completely. I still have a belly full of nerves when I toe the starting line. And I think it's healthy because it means I'm dialed in and it means I care. And I still think you, as much TV as you have done, and I've done TV as well, like you you should feel a little bit of that churn when you step up, because you want to do your best. And I think it means you're not just saying, whatever happens, happens. So there's a line between, as you said, running to the bathroom every single time, and also just, feeling that like, okay, like this matters, and I got this, and I've prepped, but I'm going to give this my best. So I do think that like level of it dials down, but you always should have a little bit of it.
I want to just touch on one more of your 7 things, and my audience is going to have to read the book to get the rest. But number 5 is finding the patience to keep going when you hit plateaus or walls. This is something that people experience in their financial life all the time. You have a setback. You need to put a new roof on your house, and all of a sudden that goal, you can just see it moving further back. How did you deal with that?
I had dealt with it in my financial life and just life in general before I ever had to deal with it in obstacle course racing. And I think we live in a very different world financially and professionally than existed 30 plus years ago. Things are quite uncertain. People, I think, lose and change jobs with more regularity now. And so you are always going to sort of have these rises when things are going great. And then you may have this dip when it all falls off a cliff and you've got to figure out what to do. And then you kind of get on a plateau and you're wondering what's next. And there's different attributes that we have to tap into in ourselves to navigate the rises, the dips, and the plateaus. And so I knew that from my own finances. I knew it from, as I'm sure many listeners out there and people watching this have known, like from health scares, both from myself and from people that I love. And then I learned it in training, and it was very different for me because when I invested in my career, and you may identify with this, as I said, words came pretty easily to me. So it was a lot of being on a rise and learning. And it wasn't that I didn't have setbacks, but I never struggled the way I struggled when I started obstacle course racing. And I had to be very, very patient. I was one of the oldest people in the gym. Often, I, for a long time, was not nearly strong enough to pull myself up over a wall. I fell off that 17-foot rope at Citi Field, where the New York Mets play baseball. In my first Spartan race, they sometimes hold these races in baseball stadiums. I came in, as you noted about yourself, when cross country, like I came in, dead last in a very important race, national race early on. I even had to drop out of a race in New Jersey because I didn't know what to wear and I was too cold and it was in the low 40s. And after I went through that dunk wall where you got wet, I started tipping into hypothermia, and it would just, I don't think I'd ever quit anything in my life until that point. But from those moments, each time I stood back up and I kept running or I signed up for another race, I learned something. And this learning is something we all can do. It's an edge, it's an equalizer, no matter what skills you're born with. I might not be the fastest or the strongest or have the most muscle mass or the best fast twitch muscles, but I know how to learn, and I can harness that to my advantage. I can learn about gear and about weather, about hydration, and all of those things helped me. And I think for anyone who's facing a plateau where they have to have patience or a dip where something hasn't happened, figure out where you can do some learning at whatever stage you're in, and that will be an edge that gets you going.
Where do you suggest that people look for new things to learn? I'm sure there are people listening who are thinking, yeah, this sounds incredible. Spartan racing, not for me. Running a marathon, not for me. What are the things that come up time and again that give people the same results, psychic results, I guess, that we can look at if we're looking to embrace a new challenge?
Let's go back just to the very first part of our conversation, which was that existential question, what do you want to be when you grow up? I mean, when you are little, you have a lot of things that excite you and that you think about, and then your world starts to narrow a bit, right? As you pick one thing and we think that's the thing I have to be. But I bet many people have memories of things that they thought they wanted to try, or that they've dabbled in a little bit, but just figured they didn't have the time, or I'm too old for this, or here's another one. Society tells me I'm too old for this. The notion that you in 40, as you're approaching 50, that you're going to pick up something where you're slithering under barbed wire and running around in mud is very counterintuitive. And I've had people say, well, gosh, didn't you feel silly doing that as a woman? And I thought, no, I don't feel so silly when I can scale an 8-foot wall. Like, I feel pretty good, right? And I think you cannot I think the one thing is, in addition to thinking about the things that excited you, both when you were a child and also that you've tried through the years, like listen to your gut, listen to what you like to do. Do not listen to what people tell you should be doing, right? Or the thing necessarily that all your friends are doing, but that you just are like, ugh, I really don't feel like going out. Like pickleballs, I get it, but it's not for me, right? Find the thing that makes you, as I said earlier, makes you want to either turn off Netflix or watch videos on how other people are learning to do it. The thing that makes you want to learn. That is the place that I would start. I am going to give a plug for no matter what you choose to do, even if it's a very cerebral activity. And I think you'll back me up on this, Jean, that you should add regular movement to your life, because we know that if you want to be engaging in these activities for as long as possible with the people that you love, you have got to have movement in your life. It is one of the biggest things in our control to ensure that we have some say in our longevity. And that is, again, there's a lot that is not in our control, our genes and destiny, things that could just happen as we walk out the door. But I do want to give a plug for movement.
It's also the best tool that we have for reducing stress. And I
Yes.
think sometimes people forget that. Fidelity did a big study where they looked at the financial stressors in people's lives, 40 of them. Changing jobs, moving, losing a spouse, getting divorced, getting married, all of them. And when they tried to figure out what reduced stress in each and every one of those situations, exercise popped to the top of the list.
I believe it. And I think, look, if there's probably many pillars, but two important pillars to waking up without stress to me are having your financial house in order and having your body, your physical self in order. Other things are going to, come into play and throw you curveballs all the time. But those are two things we actually can make some choices about every day that move us into, again, waking up without that angst. And I'm glad you made that connection to stress, because I think it's an important one.
The book is Not Too Late, The Power of Pushing Limits at Any Age. Wendy Bounds, congratulations on this. Congratulations on all of your achievements, athletic and otherwise. Thanks for doing this with us today.
Well, I'm glad you had me, Jean. I want to get you out for a Spartan race with me. There are non-competitive heats. We can try one together, and we'll get a bunch of your listeners, and we can go out as a team together. And I should just say right now that anyone who buys a copy of the book can get a code for a free Spartan race. So if they want to try and it's interesting to them, I can't say enough good things about it, the sport, and the details are on my website.
Okay, if you guys are interested, send us a note and we'll take a look at that. Thanks, Wendy. It's been fun.
Yeah, look forward to seeing you in the mud, Jean.